John, welcome to the Astroben podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's a sunny day in Seattle, so can't complain too much.
Yeah, it seems to be sunny everywhere. I'm currently in New York. It's sunny, and back home in London in the UK, it's hottest day of the year so far. So the sun is smiling on us as a planet
Awesome.
at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, look, I just wanted to jump straight in, really, because I'm sort of fascinated by your story. I hadn't heard of Integrate. So why don't we start with that? You know, what is Integrate? Give me your 30-second or 2-3 minute elevator pitch. You know, what does it does and what problem does it solve?
Yeah. So tagline for Integrate is program management software for the world's most ambitious machines. In there, we definitely mean the people building ambitious machines themselves, as well as the hardware that they build. So we built, in essence, a program management software for building hardware. Worked at 3 space unicorns so far, so valued over $1 billion startups as a very, very early employee at every single one, and saw the exact same issue where first you reach for Jira because it's available for tasking and tasking and milestones, and then you realize it doesn't have the road mapping capabilities, so you reach for Smartsheet, and then around the 50-person mark, you start to get more advanced with your requirements definitions, so then you reach for JAMA, and then you're so far down the hole with all of these that you realize that they don't speak to each other, and you have all of this sort of ephemera of what the product should be surrounding this dark matter where the product actually is,
Yeah.
or the hardware, whether it's a rocket, a laptop, a car, a motorcycle, speakers, or any other consumer electronics that are complex to design or manufacture. And so what we wanted to build with Integrate was the ability to first and foremost see the product. So you build a product diagram and hierarchy, and then you can add all of your requirements, milestones, tasking to that specifically. But the real powerful part of it is that the problems we ran into at each of the companies that I've worked with before is that you build this beautiful, exquisite schedule, roadmap, all these milestones and everything, and then you have no way to translate that to external stakeholders.
Yeah.
So you have to dissect it, download an Excel spreadsheet, email it out, and then you no longer have a source of truth because you're going to have to ingest whatever that source of truth is whenever they get it back to you. So with Integrate, you can fully collaborate with external stakeholders as seamlessly as you do internal stakeholders, which is completely different than anything that's on the market. And just super, super powerful.
That sounds really interesting. So when you say it's a software for big and complex machines, I assume we're talking about rockets and satellites in the space sector.
So we started in the space sector, but expanding out into automotive and consumer electronics and things like this as well. Yeah.
And so in the space sector, what specific pain points in space mission management are you aiming to solve with the software, and how does it sort of differ from traditional methods? Because it sounds something like when you have a mission, you can kind of track the progress of that mission. If it's if a satellite's docking with another satellite or being refueled or something like that. So is it the once it's taken off that part of the mission, or is it the build to get to launch? What section is there the most value?
Yeah, so we're firmly in the design, build, and communication aspect prior to launch. We don't do on-orbit mission operations or anything like this, but
sure,
the road to launch is incredibly complex because you have 2 very complex machines, a spacecraft and a rocket at the very, very simplest interaction. And there are usually about 3,000 requirements, tasks, milestones, and things to get one spacecraft onto one rocket. And we have, in the space industry, essentially program managers that are called mission managers to coordinate the interface control document between the spacecraft and the rocket, because you need power, there are thermal restrictions, center of mass, and various things, how the satellite is going to disconnect, what requirements the satellite needs to meet to be able to not destroy any other satellites on the way up to orbit. So vibe testing and things like this. So a lot of our space customers utilize Integrate to put in their interface control documents. So say, hey, this is everything that you need to do and all of the requirements that you need to meet directly with their customers. But then on the back end, they have all of the production and everything that goes into on the customer side, building the satellite. They have their own schedule that the rocket manufacturer can't see or the launch mission manager can't see. And then on the rocket side, they could have their entire build for the rocket and all of these tasks, milestones, and schedules that the customer can't see on the satellite side. But they can all be connected and obfuscated on either side, so that you're working on live, real-time inputs and updates together on only the pieces that you want each other to see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't come from a science or engineering background. I work in my day job, sort of hospitality. So I've sort of
Yeah,
used various event management softwares and especially on the sales side, like it's pretty normal to have a CRM system where you can track inquiries and I'm quite a big fan of Salesforce.
yeah,
It sounds a similar sort of thing because you kind of have a sort of framework software, but you can kind of tweak it to be optimized for your business. Because I imagine in the space industry, different companies, you know, they do the same thing in terms of there's logistics and comms, but the nuances of it, they all probably have their own systems and processes. And does it make it easy to sort of adjust it and optimize it for different
absolutely.
companies? Mm.
Yeah, in the entire architecture and design was made to be infinitely flexible, but also usable, so that you don't have to do this gigantic lift of, I've implemented Salesforce multiple times before, and it's usually like a 3-month process if you're a really small company, up to a 6 to 18 month process, and then goes kind of as far into the future and as much cash as you have to burn to implement a lot of what they have. There's also a very one-way nature to the information. People can fill out forms that ingests information into Salesforce or into Jira or into Smartsheet or something like this, but you
Mm.
don't get the two-way communication that you do with Integrate. So while you can send forms to your customers to ingest data into Integrate, you can also then use those same forms to collaborate on and edit back and forth. So it's a living document, not something that is just pushed once and then you have to push again and digest. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of two-way communication that I've never seen in an
Mm.
enterprise software with external collaborators.
Yeah, so interesting. Um, and I read somewhere about you're transforming the mission planning from traditional 2D logistics to a more 3D approach. I'll be honest, I don't understand what that means at all. Is that the visualization of logistics? Is it making it more uh, sort of more macro, so different managers and different teams can get more of a snapshot by looking at a process, or what does that mean in terms of mission
Yeah,
planning?
I think it's probably more in the aspect that everything that we're doing is real time. So we don't necessarily get into CAD rendering and things like this, but
Mm.
the fact that you're not just sending somebody a spreadsheet um, of dates that they then have to ingest and then recycle back to you and all this. It's just a very live, um, kind of a real world scenario planning that you can do with Integrate. It doesn't leave anything stuck.
Mm. Interesting. And you mentioned it sounds like your experience at previous companies has really sort of shaped shaped Integrate really. Which companies did you work at? Just to give listeners a bit of context, and perhaps like how did they specifically, uh, mold your, the product you have now? What specific pain points? You don't have to say for which different companies, but
Yeah, 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 yeah.
which companies did you work at, and how
Yeah,
did that lead to today?
yeah. So worked at Spire Global, interned at Spire Global very early on when there were only like 20 to 40 people, I believe. Um, and there worked on a million different topics, but some around launch verification matrices, so essentially coordinating all the requirements necessary, some on supply chain and other various data and information projects, and then worked at Astranis building micro geotelecommunication satellites. I was employee number 6. I think they have something like 600 now over in this really beautiful office in San Francisco. And that's where I was handling something like hundreds of external vendors and having to bring in all of their inputs, all of the lead times, all the technical specifications, all of these things in a million different various formats that they would give it, whether it's their portal, Java login, a PDF, or anything like this. So I wanted a system I could use to communicate with external vendors, because I was working in supply chain there and on the business development end. And so we'd have to bring in all these inputs, synthesize them with our technology roadmap and all of our engineers internally, and then flow some of those through to outputs to our customers. And so I just wanted a way that you could communicate with the external world and do everything you needed to do internally without giving up your entire schedule, and then giving small parts of that out to your customers as well. So that was a huge crux of where I really wish I had a tool like Integrate. Then went to SpaceFlight, which was aggregating a whole bunch of satellites, small satellites, onto large vehicles. I think we're doing something like 150 satellites on 80 different contracts for 50 different customers on 23 missions on 7 distinct vehicles. Each one of those satellites had roughly 3,000 requirements, tasks, milestones, and things like this. So that's really where I dug in and was like, okay, I really need a system that allows us to see all of these customers on a single launch and allow them to have a custom portal experience without them knowing that they are all on the same launch or able to see any of their information. And then went to ABL Space Systems and sort of wanted for the same thing. And once I saw the fourth use case for this, I was like, okay, I've got to go build something.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, you've recently closed the seed round, which I was reading about, and expanding into new industries beyond space. So can you share more about these sort of growth areas? And does that come from a place of, well, you've worked it out for rockets, and that is arguably the most difficult human-made mechanical piece of, well, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong, but is like you've done the hard work, so you might as well transfer it to another industry?
Yeah, that's dead on. We closed a round led by Hyperplane and with Riot, Ravelin, and a few others this time last year, on the order, a few million. And raising in 2023 was awful, first and foremost. Like, it was raising. I don't think raising is ever just a walk through the park. But raising in 2023 wasn't spectacular, and so we kind of stopped in the middle of raising, and we were like, wait a second, what do we have here? Because space industry is not big enough. And then we went out to 100, I think about 100 potential customers, and we're like, this is what we built. And we had, we were at beers with a few Apple and Google engineers, or program managers, who were like, we've wanted this our entire life. This is a technical program management software that we've needed our entire careers. Why are you only building this for the space industry?
Right. And
so we went and tested that out with a number of other hardware companies. They're like, yes, we absolutely need something that does this. So we're like, okay, completely re-architected the application to be more flexible, and largely we had all the components we needed to service these industries in a really spectacular way. It's starting to prove out with a number of the customers that we have.
Fantastic. And you've obviously got going back to space, because what we do on the podcast, all about space. You've secured contracts with the US Space Force and Firefly Aerospace, which is awesome. Can you talk about the sort of scope and scale of those contracts? Like, I don't know much about the US Space Force, to be honest,
Yeah.
other than the sort of headlines and how much funding they're getting. That's basically it. So what are you doing for them, and what how are they going to be using the software to improve their processes?
Yeah. So both of those contracts came down to our initial use case, which was mission management directly. So yeah, there were two of the first interested parties willing to hop on, and from those case studies, we've had a number of other customers: ESAR, Aerospace out of Germany, Nanorex, now Voyager Space Exploration, um, who have been using it all for the same initial reason we built the application, which is communicate with their customers or vendors being launch vehicle suppliers, and customers being people building spacecraft and payloads. So that use case has stayed very, very consistent throughout. And now we're starting to get into other use cases that we didn't even necessarily anticipate with, human spaceflight or product design companies that build hardware for people explicitly and want to communicate with their customers. So it stayed fairly consistent. We wanted to build a mission management software initially, and so people hopped at that when they realized how powerful it was and that it was built for them. And it turns out mission management is largely just program management with multiple stakeholders. So program managers have flocked to us because of that.
Absolutely. And I like speaking to people like yourself, because it's sort of the space industry is so new, and the space economy. You mentioned companies like NanoRacks, and there's a host of privately owned companies that can be doing stuff in space. And would you say that these sort of digital tools in the space industry, they have been seen as a bit of a sort of nice to have? And do you think that's changing, and now these tools are becoming sort of indispensable? Because I imagine, especially like the space industry, is very sort of stuck in its ways, and especially in the US, and they might be a bit less trusting of these kind of softwares. Have you found that that's sort of changing?
Yeah, trust is huge, because when you introduce a new system to anything, it inherently introduces risk, and the ability to run alongside um, their systems before, and show them how much more powerful this can be. But when you look back at the majority of enterprise solutions, just about everything we have is a nice to have.
Mm.
Riverside, great platform, but it doesn't mean that podcast recording didn't exist prior to it, right? It's Salesforce CRM. We had spreadsheets, and there's still companies that use spreadsheets to track things. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, and that's why Salesforce has such spectacular valuation and following. But there are ways to do these things. But we also designed the SR-71 with a slide rule. It's like,
Yeah.
do we want to, or do we want to move faster, focus on rapid iteration, integration, and have tools that allow us to do that, or do we want to stay where we are? So a lot of nice to haves have turned into need to haves, just because of the efficiency gains. And I think that's largely where we stand as well. Is once people go from using email and Excel sheets and everything to do their design and build and communicate with external stakeholders, to using Integrate, it's a very, very hard sell to get them back. So it becomes a need to have because of the efficiencies. And honestly, the experience for their customers is just completely different, and it changes that a lot. When people are spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions or tens of millions, for an experience, you want it to be beautiful and customized end to end, and Integrate offers that. So yeah,
And that's a good
that's what I
answer.
think.
It's a good point. And do you when a company takes on the software, do you require a certain level of adoption? Like, do you need 99% of the people that's supposed to be using it to use it, or
No,
how does that work?
we prefer the exact opposite. We
Oh,
want
really?
the because you're dead on that. What I call large organization antibodies are strong.
Mm,
So anytime somebody gets a whiff of, oh my god, I'm going to have to change my workflow, or I have to try this new software, or I've been down this road before, just let me use what I know I can use. The more people you have voicing those opinions, the stronger the antibodies to change are.
mm,
So the way we built to integrate with this external internal collaboration aspect and sharing um, allows for small little sectors to pop up within a large organization, get happy with it, get excited about it, and then you don't have to, with the way Integrate's built, you don't have to download an instance of it because it's completely firewalled off from everything else, and then
mm.
re-upload and try to combine all these things. You just share it with the stakeholders at the other business unit that you're working with. So we actually ask that we get a few really, really passionate users to play out the use cases and start the contract small, and then they can slowly allow it to expand to other aspects. Did that answer your question? I feel like I
No,
might have done a little bit
absolutely,
of stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree from my very different experience, because it's like you want to create like raving fans of the software within the organization, so they're the ones that can convince their colleagues to like give it a go and sell the
Yeah,
benefits. That's really smart.
exactly. Yeah.
Just think about other technologies in the in space systems. What emerging technologies are you most excited about in the space industry? And are there any that Integrate are preparing to integrate with in its mission management software?
Yeah. Um, there aren't a lot of technologies that we're going to directly integrate with that aren't outside of, you know, enterprise level. I think our customers and the customer use cases are what I'm most thrilled about.
Mm.
So you could say we're integrating with their businesses because we're becoming a fairly integral part of their communication with customers. But, the potential to use this for uh, human spaceflight applications, or the potential for um, all the different types of spacecraft that are going up that are utilizing Integrate to coordinate their road to space, generally more exciting, and that runs the entire gamut. So
For
that's
sure.
yeah,
It's super
so much
exciting.
more
What
excited about. Yeah.
what's your sort of longer term vision for the future of Integrate? What's your, where do you see the company in the next 5 to 10 years, and what milestones are you most focused on achieving?
Yeah. So our ideal, obviously, would be synonymous with hardware development and complex hardware development. So when people say, "Are you on Integrate so I can send you this
Mm.
plan or something like this?" The response is, of course. Do I look like I know what I'm doing? Of course I am on Integrate. Yeah, send it on over. We really want to build uh, a platform for all of these ecosystems that allows them to communicate so seamlessly that there aren't roadblocks to building the next major defense company or the next major space company or anything like this. I think so much software is built with an insular mindset that does not allow you to connect with the greater world, and hardware is inherently collaborative. Even if you're 96%
Mm.
vertically integrated, which are very, very, very few companies out there, you're still buying and building alongside other vendors, contract manufacturers, contract engineers, design engineers, and all these things. So we'd like to see a world where, the question, are you on Integrate, is almost an insult if you're not,
Yeah,
yeah,
I get it completely. Well, I'm
yeah,
very impressed by the sort of entrepreneurship side of things. I've, for my faults, I've been an entrepreneur all my adult life in the hospitality world, so I understand the pain of the journey. How have you found it on a personal level? I mean, you've obviously had a lot of insights having worked for these space unicorns during the early days, but it's nothing like
yeah.
doing it yourself, right?
Nothing like doing it yourself. I've gone back and apologized to the majority of my former bosses because I've only worked for founders before, and realizing that the things that I kicked and screamed about with each of them probably wouldn't make my list of 75 things to worry about as a founder myself. Uh, it's strange, and ask me in 2 weeks or ask me in a year, but
Exactly.
I think it's been one of the best things for me ever. I'm healthier than I've ever been. It's forced me to really hone in on my sleep, on my diet, and all of these things. Because if I go as hard as I can all the time, I'll just destroy myself. Um, and so it's forced me to put up boundaries and really strip down to the things that I need to make sure I'm taken care of so that I don't drive myself into the ground, and so that I can be there for my team, be there for our customers, most importantly, be there for my family. Um, my dog's napping on my leg right now, and my now wife of 3 months is upstairs. And none of this really matters without him. So it's been a really great forcing function to take care of myself. And there have been days where I'm in pain. There have been many days where I'm in pain, but the best reaction that's come out of this is, instead of going grabbing a beer or a shot or something, is going for a walk or going for a bike ride, or getting out um, and thinking through things and facing them head on.
That's great advice. Yeah. Well, be the best version of yourself, and then you can be the best version to friends, family, clients, all that.
Yeah,
But I think I was going to ask you about your advice you would give to aspiring space entrepreneurs, but I think you've sort of given it there, really.
yeah,
If there is someone listening, particularly in the area of space tech and software development, other than just do it, what what would you what would you say to them? Because we sort of live in a time where everyone's talking about space. There's a lot of focus on launches, big SpaceXs and Blue Origins of this world, but there's a lot of companies out there sort of quietly launching and finding their way. What would you say to anyone with a cool idea that could work in
yeah.
space?
There are very few things, within the limits of physics that are impossible. And everybody is going to, there are a lot of people out there that'll tell you that it's not, or that it doesn't matter, it doesn't work. If you have the experience and if you have the perspective and conviction to know it works, just keep going. They're, the saying, um, companies don't just die, founders give up, and found more and more to be true. Our seed raise was awful, and we came very, very close. And there were many times that I just did not want to speak to another investor or try again or anything like this. And yeah, just keep going. It's there are going to be failures, but think of your last 3 to 5 to 10 failures and how much you think of them on a daily basis. If you're at least a year or 2 or 3 removed, what came out of it, all of the experiences of what not to do, or how not to act, or how to act, or how to pick yourself back up. Just pick yourself up, get back to it, and get some good sleep.
Great advice. Well, it's been so great to chat. A sort of final thought. I was just wondering. I sometimes ask this to guests, but you've obviously always had an interest in the space industry. I can assume that from the companies you've worked at and the direction your life's gone. But was there a sort of pivotal moment, or were you into Star Wars or Star Trek as a kid, or did you fall into it? What's your sort of motivation, your why, and as to why you do what you do?
Yeah, so it was actually not big into space. I think I had a little stint in astronomy when I was younger, but I was super into Egyptology, and I was super into music. I had a record label before I went into tiny little record label that I failed miserably, but some good bands. Straight out of high school and before I went into the Air Force, But the thing that really got me going on space was I was always in love with technology, always in love with the business side of things, all this. So after the Air Force, I really loved working on the planes and everything that I did. Found Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, which is a spectacular organization. And if your chapter is not particularly spectacular, what made it such a spectacular organization for me was that I then tried everything I could to make it spectacular for me and people around me. And it's a great testing ground for those things. So SEDS USA really is what launched me into the space industry, and where I cut my teeth and made a whole lot of the connections that I have in today. And I got my first 3 jobs in the space industry were directly tied to connections I made from Students for the Exploration and Development of Space.
Fantastic. Well, look, it's been great to chat. I'd love to speak to you, and between the next 5 to 10 year mark, and let's see how big Integrate can go. But I love your enthusiasm, and thank you so much for the advice to myself and everyone listening.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.